Hey guys, how are you all beautiful people? Hope all of you are doing fine. And yes, this is next part of Godlike Hokage in Naruto. The Gura Gura no Mi is known as the strongest fruit in the world of One Piece. In Naruto world, the blood limit would grant the strongest power for those ninjas. But what if the Gura Gura no Mi is found in the world of Naruto and after it is eaten it will be like a blood limit power? Well, the MC just took that fruit. This story begins before the Second Ninja War by 2 years. So let's start without any delay. Whoosh! The energy slash flew out toward the Kazekage, cracking the space around it. It actually looked as if it was gonna split it. In the face of this technique, the Kazekage didn't dare to underestimate it. With the move of his hand, he condensed the iron sand around him, forming a huge wall. Magnet release, sand iron shield. Boom! The shockwave suddenly hit the wall and cracked it. What? The third Kazekage was shocked by the power of this simple slash. It could even crack his iron sand shield. The shock force continued on pushing its way through his shield, but it was eventually blocked. Under the Kazecage's control, the iron sand shield suddenly changed its form into the shape of a pyramid and rushed toward Naito. Iron sand gathering assault. The huge iron sand pyramid rushed forward, but Naito didn't look surprised. Waving his sword, he struck it with the power of the shock. Crack! The space in front him once again got cracked, and the huge pyramid got shattered by Naito's sword. Then he rushed at top speed toward the Kazekage. Whoosh! Naito's movements were very fast. Even the Kazekage revealed a hint of surprise. Obviously, his speed was completely beyond his expectations. However, he was at the level of a Kage. Even if he didn't have the same speed, he could control his sand iron very quick to recondense it into a defensive state. Boom! 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 Naito didn't hesitate to attack the iron sand in front of him, but he didn't use a big amount of his shock because he needed to be ready to defend against it in case the Kazekage changed its shape. In the face of this strong defense, Naito was trying to constantly move very fast around the Kazekage to break his defense. The iron sand movement wasn't slow. In fact, the Kazekage was defending against Naito while trying to find an opening to counterattack. This is the power of a man who reached the peak of the Kage level. If he were any lower than that, he would have already been killed by Naito. However, the third Kazekage was being pushed by Naito from the very beginning of the fight, and he could only defend against him. Earthquake release, Kuzu. Holding his Kusanagi sword, Naito started to flash around the Kazekage while striking him with countless shockwaves. In an instant, the Kazekage looked like if he was trapped inside countless of shockwaves heading toward him from all directions. Naito wanted to break the Kazekage's defense from every direction so he cannot move his iron sand to block his attacks. Magnet release, iron sand armor. The Kazekage knew that he couldn't block every attack, so he condensed a huge iron sand ball around him and wrapped himself in it. Boom! 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 The shockwaves hit the surface of the iron sand ball one by one, and it started to crack it. It looked like if it was gonna destroy. The Kazekage who was inside that iron sand ball looked a little bit horrified. He never expected that his attack will be this powerful. His absolute defense should be able to block even S-class ninjutsu, but now it can barely stop Naito's attack. The Kazekage envied Naito who had such a strong ability, and he could no longer disperse his iron sand again. He simply stayed inside that ball while enhancing it every time to block Naito's next attack. Naito continued on attacking the iron sand ball from all directions in order to break the Kazekage's absolute defense. It seemed like if the Kazekage was blocking Naito's attacks, but in fact, he was just being pushed by him. The sand shine abyss in the distance looked stunned at that moment. They never thought for a moment that the Kazekage will be pushed by Naito. If this continues, the Kazekage will lose. Not necessarily, with this absolute defense, that guy will never be able to break in, and the Kazekage will not lose. The shine abyss in the field were overflowed with cold sweat, although the guy said it with his own mouth. They all knew that the Kazekage can only defend against Naito, which already considered as a defeat. The holder of the strongest ability in the history of the village, the strongest Kazekage, the man who is one of the strongest 5 shine abyss alive, is being defeated by a shinobi from Konoha. This news is worth enough to shake the whole world. At this moment, in a hidden room inside the Sand Village, a group of suspicious ninjas was sitting around a table. From the first glance, you could guess that they were all elites. They were the elders of the Sand. The Kazekage is getting pushed, he will lose if this continues. We cannot let this happen, even if Konoha's Ashura didn't win against the Kazekage, and escape. This will also have a great impact on the reputation of the Sand Village, which will affect the morale of our army on the battlefield. Several elders gathered down to find a solution. Suddenly the expression of one of them changed and finally said, "I think we should use the Ichibi's power." Once he said this sentence, one of the elders got upset. "No." Another directly slammed the table and replied strongly saying, "We don't even have a Jinchuriki who can use his power, it will be dangerous to use him." But there's no other way, the Ichibi is the only one who can face Konoha's Ashura. The village got already evacuated. Even if the Ichibi went out of control, there wouldn't be a lot of casualties, then we will seal him again after that. But we don't have time for this, let's vote on this by raising the hands. The silence controlled the room as the elders of the Sand were about to decide whether they should use the Ichibi's power. On the outside, after he tried for many times to break the Kazecage's absolute defense, Naito finally understood that this one was a lot harder to break than the one the thousands of ninjas from the rock used at the Second World War. After all, the Iron Sand release was a lot stronger, and once it gets condensed it becomes indeed a true absolute defense, which is much stronger than the technique that the rocks has used against him. Naito couldn't go all out, he always needed to keep himself ready to defend against the Iron Sand. Since the ordinary shock force couldn't smash this thing, then Naito's eyes flashed with a particular color, then he jumped into the air, he grabbed his sword with 2 hands, then he swung it. Shockwave. Whoosh. Space got cracked as if it was a broken mirror. The cracks kept spreading until the whole village looked as if it was got split. The Iron Sand ball was at the center of this attack. Suddenly a crack appeared on its surface. However, the crack got healed immediately. I cannot reach him, this ball has no limit, it heals itself every time, even my shockwaves couldn't shatter it. Looking at this scene, Naito's eyes flashed while he whispered these words. The power of the shockwaves is a lot stronger than an ordinary shock, it should be with the current strength of Naito at the S-class level. If one didn't do the job, a few more will do it. With a serious look on his face, Naito held his Kusanagi sword, and then he waved it several times. Whoosh! With the move of his sword, the shockwaves fell from the sky one after another. On the ground, the third Kazekage was standing inside his Iron Sand ball, while his forehead was showing traces of cold sweat. If this continues, the power of the shockwaves will split him into 2 halves along with his Iron Sand ball. I cannot stop such an attack, the power of his shock force is really terrible, I need to go all out. After he took a deep breath, the Kazekage's expression became very serious, and suddenly, he waved his 2 hands. Magnet release, sand iron. Whoosh! His chakras start to flow, and suddenly, a significant amount of sand iron begin to gather from all over the village. It looked as if it was the Kage's turn to attack. However, the Kage was only trying to enhance the power of his iron sand ball. The iron sand ball didn't go bigger, it was actually shrinking but getting more solid. The iron sand was getting compressed even harder. This was the real absolute defense. The endless shockwave that Naruto sent toward the iron sand ball finally hit it, but it only left few scratches on its surface. The Kage managed to block it altogether. It's not that the shockwaves weren't strong. The destroyed ground around the iron sand ball is the proof that the power of the shock is definitely strong. It got completely blocked. This is the true power of the absolute defense of the third Kage. In the distance, the sand shinobi felt terrified the moment they saw what Naruto's shockwave did to the ground, but they felt relieved when they saw that the iron sand ball was unharmed by his attack. It is called an absolute defense because nothing can break it. This really good. With this kind of defensive power, I don't think that there's anyone who have a stronger defense than the third Kage. Looking at the high density of the iron sand ball under him, Naruto whispered these words. Naruto was still standing in the sky. He looked as if he was standing on a broken mirror in the space. To make it clear, the legend says that even a Bijudama won't break the Kage's defense. The only thing that is stronger than his iron sand ball is his iron sand spear. He's the only one who can break his own defense. Well, Naruto wasn't sure that this stuff can block the power of a Bijudama. After he shook his head, Naruto released his hand, and the Kusanagi sword disappeared in the smoke. Later, Naruto extended his hand, and his chakra began to flow and condense madly. Naruto didn't know if the Bijudama could break his absolute defense, but he was sure that his Hokage can break this so-called absolute defense. Even the dust doesn't have a chance against his Hokage. And since his chakra and shock got stronger, his Hokage should also be stronger. Naruto's shock power has reached the 4th stage, therefore, the Hokage technique should have an extremely terrifying power now. There's nothing that it cannot destroy. The only disadvantage of that technique is its speed. It can be easily avoided. But the third Kage has already trapped himself in his shell. He has no place to escape. He can only defend against every attack. Let's see if this so-called absolute defense can block my Hokage. Naruto stared at the bottom, and there was already a white light ball with a human head size on his palm. The core was extremely dazzling. It looked like a small sun, with a faint white light. Even the size was different from before. Whoosh! Suddenly, Naruto waved his hand sending that ball toward the Kage's absolute defense. Earthquake release, Hokage. Crack! Under the gaze of countless feared sand shinobis, the light ball fell and reached the iron sand ball. Yet nothing has happened, it didn't even make a sound. Silence. Naruto's expression was very calm, he was just looking at the ground, he simply didn't have a slight doubt that the end was near. Silence. Suddenly under the gaze of everyone in the field, the Kage absolute defense got destructed. In the blink of the eye, the entire sand iron ball disappeared into nothing. Nothing remained, even the Kage got disappeared completely. There was no flesh, no blood, no bones, there was no trace of him. The only thing left was the big hole in the ground, and nothing else. Glub. That was the sound of one of the ninjas in the place swallowing. No one spoke, no one could even talk, because there was nothing to say. However, deep in their minds, countless of thoughts were flashing. Some of them felt an intense headache in their heads from the shock they had in their hearts. The third Kage is dead. With the establishment of the 5 major villages, and the presence of the first Hokage Sanju Hachirama, the world lived a quite long time in peace. No one dared to start a war until the death of Hachirama. In the First World War, 4 Hokages has died. The second Tsuchikage and the second Mitsukage killed each other in a fierce battle. Both the second Hokage and the second Raikage has also died. In the Second War, the Kages didn't take part in battles except for the third Tsuchikage, therefore, none of the Kages has died. By this time, the village system has already become perfect. They start to emerge Anbu captains, and hands for every Kage, which helped them commanding their armies into the battle. The first one to die after a long time was the third Kage. And the most incredible thing is that he wasn't killed in the battlefield, he died in his own village, he died in the sand-hidden village. It's simply unbelievable. Even though there was a lot of Kages in the history, none of them has died in his own village. Naito alone managed to kill the Kage under the watchful eyes of countless of sand shinobis. Not even the shinobis, even the elders felt stunned at that moment. They were all shocked. Just a moment before, they all were waiting for the Kage's counter-attack. Suddenly, with one attack from Naito, he was gone along with his absolute defense. Almost no one could react. At this moment, the pain was all that they felt. They were looking at both the hole on the ground, and Naito who was standing there. The Kage-sama is dead. No, that's impossible. Some couldn't believe it. The Kage of their village died in front of them in the middle of their village by Naito. At this moment, Naito was standing there also looking at the big hole in the ground. The Kage was really strong, I couldn't break his absolute defense with my sword. Naito whispered these words to himself. Initially he thought after he reached the 4th level of the shock force he would be able to destroy anything using his fist. Because Naito was sure that if he re-encounters Onaki, he would now be able to destroy his dust release by only using his fists. But now that seems impossible. Even after the power he gained, the two releases seems like they will always cancel each other. The dust release is the strongest bloodline limit after all. The advantage of the shock force is its power of growth. Naito will always get stronger after all, and he might be able to destroy this absolute defense using his fists eventually. As long as his growth continues, he will be able to destroy everything with one punch. The sand shinobis didn't know what was Naito thinking about. The only thing they know that Naito had broken the Kage's absolute defense and killed him. However, they weren't gonna give up. The Anbu captain got killed, and now the Kage. No one can stop him. Naito looked around indifferently. The whole time he was fighting, he was thinking if he should kill the Kage, and wipe out the entire village for good. Suddenly a roar came out from a distance, it even made Naito a little bit surprised. This is in the distance, far away from the battlefield. In a secret hidden place in the sand village, a person was standing. He was a Jinchuriki. Of course, he couldn't control the Ichibi's chakra, he was just a container. If he wanted to use the Ichibi's power, the only solution he had is to break his seal. At this moment, a ninja reached him and broke his seal, and suddenly a crazy chakra emerged. Whoosh! The moment he broke the seal, the violent chakra destroyed the place. Ha ha ha! I finally came out. Almost in an instant, the Ichibi's body got out from his cage, and the ninja who broke the seal escaped the place. At the next moment, the Ichibi looked at the bottom where his Jinchuriki was standing. The man looked very weak, and he could barely speak. With a trembled tone he said, "Go and kill the enemy." The Ichibi kept looking at him, completely ignoring his words. At the next moment, the Ichibi made a sharp and strange laughter with a hint of sarcasm. "Wow, Ha ha ha, so that's why they released me. Well, I never been interested in the humans' matters, but hell, since you released me, I will try to be selfless and kill him along with a bunch of others. After he laughed, he emerged a huge terrifying chakra that destroyed the place. Boom! The ground got crashed, and the place started trembling, and endless sand suddenly came out and started destroying the area. The ninja who broke the seal looked very terrified. When he saw this scene, he wanted to escape, but the sand has already captured him and crushed him along with countless of buildings around the area. The Ichibi suddenly jumped directly in the center of the village right in front of Naito. Naito looked slightly surprised as he was looking at the Ichibi in front of him. I almost forgot about you. Guehehe, so you're the one who was giving these people trouble which made them release me. The Ichibi was looking at Naito and laughing very loud. At the next moment, the Ichibi stared with his scary eyes at the place, sweeping it through all the sand shine abyss. It's the Ichibi. They released the Ichibi, this is really bad. All the sand shine abyss fell back at once. The Ichibi's body was very big, that it covered the whole place, and sand shine abyss couldn't even afford the idea of fighting along with him. The Ichibi glanced at the sand shine abyss, then he looked back at Naito. Although, it was because of you they released me. But you will just die along with them. Suddenly, the Ichibi attacked Naito using his claws. Whoosh! The horrible wind pressure instantly burst out as his huge claws were falling. It looked like it was gonna smash everything, it seemed unstoppable. This bad. No one can stop the Ichibi. What the elders are thinking. After he kills him, we will be next. The sand shine abyss were watching this scene in horror. Although he was not targeting them, they were so terrified. After all, even though Naito was an enemy, but at least he was a human. But the Ichibi, he's a monster. The huge claws were falling, and they were really close from turning Naito a meatloaf. Naito raised his head looking at this huge claws, yet there was not the slight confusion on his face. Instead, his eyes revealed a hint of coldness. The Ichibi didn't need to attack him. The sand shine abyss was his true enemy. They are the ones who sealed him, and there's no doubt that he hated their guts for that. The only reason he attacked Naito was because the former didn't even pay him attention. In other words, Naito ignored him instead of being afraid of him. In the Ichibi's point of view, all of the ninjas are ants, and they should be afraid of him, and Naito shouldn't be a special case. But this little bastard dared to ignore him. Naito knew very well what the Ichibi was thinking, so he wanted to teach him that he wasn't the same as these ants. Therefore, Naito didn't choose to avoid his attack. Whoosh! At the next moment, Naito clenched his fist, and the white light directly emerged around it. Then he turned toward those huge claws and slammed them. Naito wasn't even as big as one of the Ichibi's claws. And the size of his fist compared to his claws was ridiculously small. However, this wasn't a battle of size. Power is what really matters. Crack! Naito slammed his claws, and suddenly the entire sky got shattered. The space above him cracked, and it looked like if it was an invisible broken mirror. The power of the shock force suddenly slammed the Ichibi's claws. What? The Ichibi got confused. He felt as if he stepped on something that stopped his movements. But this wasn't it. Suddenly, his claws along with his whole arm got destroyed. Even his huge body got pushed back by the power of the shock and crashed on the ground. The Ichibi got stunned and widened his eyes looking at Naito in front of him. The power of Naito's punch wasn't the reason behind his shock, nor how he managed to smash his entire arm. But how Naito made him feel pain. Unbelievable. Pain. The Ichibi has never felt pain before. This was the first time for him to experience this concept since he was born. Even if his whole body got smashed by a ninjutsu, he would never feel pain, he will just get recovered after some time. It's very difficult to kill a Baijua, but even it was killed, their chakra will never disappear, but they will just get reborn again after a while. But Naito's fist made him feel pain, which was completely different. Suddenly the Ichibi emerged a huge amount of chakra, which made the whole place around him tremble. The sand started to raise and condense again, and in an instant, he restored his arm back to its original state. In the distance, the sand Shinobis saw this scene while their whole body got overflowed with cold sweat. They knew that Naito was very strong, and they weren't surprised that he managed to destroy his arm. What made them really afraid was the fact that this monster cannot die. The village got evacuated, right? Yes, they were moved to a very far place. But the situation is very bad. Konoha's Ashura cannot win this one, and when he gave up and escape, we will be the ones who will suffer. The sand Shinobis kept falling back, while they looked very scared. On the battlefield, the Ichibi restored his arm back, then he stared at Naito while he was very confused. He couldn't understand how did Naito make him feel pain. The only thing he knew, that he hated that feeling, and he needed to kill Naito who made him feel it. Wind release, drilling air bullet. This time, the Ichibi didn't use his claws to simply crush Naito, this time he was serious. Boom! The horrible chakra got surged, and a huge ball of wind got condensed, then fell at Naito. Although it wasn't a Baiju Udama, the power of this ninjutsu was extremely powerful. Even if it doesn't reach the S-class, it's enough to be considered as a high A-class ninjutsu. However, in the face of this technique, Naito didn't even move, he was standing in his place, and he simply punched it. Boom! The power of his fist shattered the ground under him along with the ball of wind that was heading toward him. Later, Naito started to walk, step by step, looking at the Ichibi in front of him. It's meaningful to fight a Baijua since it's really hard to hurt him. Yet Naito had the power to fight him face to face, and even hurt him. This guy. The Ichibi looked at Naito who was coming over toward him, and he couldn't help but feel strange. He never encountered a ninja who can fight against him. He wasn't even trying to avoid his attacks, how can he have the power to even fight back? He couldn't help but feel despised. The Ichibi got angrier, and once again he attacked Naito. Wind release, drilling air bullet. Boom! 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 This time the Ichibi sent more than just one, and the power that was emerged into these ones was bigger. Perhaps the Baijua is not that strong, but the amount of the chakra that one tail has is more than any human being. Of course, the only exception is Kizami who had the same amount of chakra as the Ichibi, but it's almost impossible for anyone to have chakra that can be compared to a Baijua. In the face of these enormous balls of wind, Naito again didn't choose to avoid them and continued on using his fists. No matter how many you throw, I will just destroy them. Boom! 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 Naito's fist fell down, and everything in the place got destroyed. All of the air bullets got shattered along with a huge explosion. This time, Naito didn't stop there and kept walking toward the Ichibi. It was his turn to attack. After he continued smashing the air bullets that the Ichibi was sending, Naito kept walking until he reached his front. Boom! With one punch he made a big hole in the lower body of the Ichibi, then he rushed over him and jumped toward his head. At the next moment, Naito swung a punch at his head. Facing Naito's fist, the Ichibi suddenly moved the sand around him and made a big shield of sand to block Naito's attack. However, it wasn't enough to stop Naito. Crack! Naito's punch destroyed half of that shield, and with the next one, the whole shield got destroyed. The power of the shock didn't stop there and covered his entire body. Boom! Under the power of Naito's punch, the Ichibi couldn't help but scream in pain. His whole body got crushed into pieces and turned into endless sand. The sand sea continued to surge. Once again it got condensed, and the Ichibi recovered his body, but the look on his face was really revealing his anger. Pain. So this how it feels. Logically speaking, the Ichibi's body is composed of chakra and sand. Even if it got smashed, there should be no pain, but Naito's fist could make him feel it. This is the power of the shock force. It can affect everything, even if it is the immortal body of the Ichibi. Damn you, you've made me angry. The Ichibi roared, while he was surging a horrible amount of chakra that made the whole ground tremble. This chakra made the sand shinobi's in the distance reveal a trace of horror. They couldn't help but retreat even further. Suddenly, almost half of the village got turned into endless sand waves, then rushed wildly at Naito. Whoosh! The sand waves covered the entire sky, then it slammed the ground making a powerful impact. What a shocking scene! Endless sand covering the entire ground rushing toward Naito. The amount of chakra that the Ichibi was surging was unbelievable, even a Kage level wouldn't be compared to it. I've made you angry. Looking at the endless sand waves rushing toward him, Naito revealed a strange expression. He couldn't help but think about the Ichibi's words. It seems that his shock force is very painful to the Ichibi. This became a little bit interesting. Laugh. In the face of this endless sand waves in the sky, Naito pulled out his sword, then rushed into the sky. Shock wave. In an instant, he sent his shock wave toward the sky, slamming the sand waves. The shock waves opened its way through the sand waves and rushed toward the Ichibi. Whoosh! The massive size of the Ichibi's body didn't help him avoiding Naito's shock waves. The moment it reached him, his whole body got split from the middle. At the same time, the Ichibi screamed in pain. It hurts, it freaking hurts. The pain of being cut by Naito's sword was even more painful than being punched. He felt like if it tore his soul. The Ichibi got angrier, his chakra became more violent, and the whole village started trembling. At the next moment, the sand under Naito's feet start moving, and instantly it wrapped his whole body, and start squeezing him. Sand binding coffin. The Ichibi had only one thought his heart, that is to kill Naito. But it can never be done. Crack. At the next moment, Naito, who was wrapped in the sand, suddenly slammed a shock force out of his body. His body was covered by an invisible transparent aura. The moment that power burst out, the endless sand around his body got crushed. At the next moment, with the use of the Shrew technique, Naito flashed toward the Ichibi and waved his sword. Whoosh! The Ichibi once again screamed in pain as his body got cut. Even though he was recovering his body every time, the Ichibi couldn't stand the feeling of the pain. It seemed like if it was endless suffering. Naito suddenly flashed several times, then came on the top of the Ichibi and kicked him. Boom! The Ichibi didn't have time to defend, and his whole body got crushed to the ground again. The Ichibi got destroyed and recovered several times, but no matter what he threw at Naito, the former always managed to counterattack him. Naito didn't even need his sword at the end, he was just smashing him using his fists. Naito was just punching him over and over again. This was the Ichibi's punishment for attacking Naito, endless suffering. Boom! 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 The Ichibi was screaming and roaring, while Naito was smashing him with his fists. What a battle! The momentum was even more terrifying than the previous fight he had with both the Anbu captain and the Kazekage. This battle has turned the entire village into a battlefield, many buildings got destroyed. And the most terrifying thing about it was that the Ichibi was losing to Naito. No one dared to sneak attack Naito. The whole army of the sand froze in their places while they had a very stunned and fearful expression in their faces. They were afraid, and the one who scared them wasn't even the Ichibi, it was Naito. Because the real monster in the place wasn't the Ichibi, it was Naito. The scene itself proves it, because you will never hear in your entire life, even if you live for 1,000 years, about a man smashing a Baijua to death using his fists. The reason why Shinobis aren't a great match against the Baijua isn't that their ninjutsu's power level cannot fight against the Baijua, it's just because Baijua has a high endurance compared to ordinary people. The reason behind calling them war weapons is because every single one of them has the power to destroy a country. Their chakra is massive, they can almost fight endlessly. Perhaps an army can stop a Baiju Udama. But what about 10, or 100? There isn't any ninja that can continue to cast A-class ninjutsu or S-class ninjutsu several times. But Baijua can, therefore, the village captured them, and used them. Since the Warring States period, the major villages used the Baijua in their wars, but only the Senju and the Uchiha could use them as their pets. Both clans could control them, not because they were only strong, but because they had the right tools to do so. But Naito wasn't an Uchiha nor a Senju, the Ichibi never met someone like him. His amount of chakra wasn't that big, it wasn't that different from the Kazekage. However, the Ichibi was looking at him as if he was the real monster. Naito's shock wasn't consuming a lot of his chakra, and his physical power was extremely strong thanks to the reverse Hakimon Tenku. Therefore, Naito could fight against the Ichibi easily. In other words, the existence of Naito is like the existence of the Baijua. He could also be considered as a war weapon, he has the power to destroy a whole country. With every hit of Naito's fist, the Ichibi screamed in pain, but he never gave up. The Ichibi kept fighting back, hoping that Naito will run out of chakra. But no matter how many hits the Ichibi took, Naito didn't look like he was even consuming chakra. His endurance and physical power can even be compared to a Baijua. The shock in the Ichibi's heart kept raising. From the moment of his birth and until this moment, he never encountered a man like Naito. Moreover, the Ichibi was scared of one more thing. Naito's power was wiping out his chakra. The Baijua can also get exhausted, but they didn't need a lot of time to recover. But this situation is different. With every hit, a part of his chakra was getting wiped out permanently, and parts of his body were no longer able to be condensed again. This has made him finally panic. Although the amount of his chakra was enormous, if this continues, he will really die. Stop! Stop! Human! Finally, the Ichibi start crying for help, screaming, asking for Naito's mercy. However, Naito ignored him and continued on beating him. The Ichibi start to panic. He could never ask for mercy even if Uchiha Madara himself was in front of him, because at most, he would be caught or controlled. But Naito was just beating him, and it really hurts, and if he continues he will really get killed. Finally, under Naito's madness, the Ichibi couldn't help but think about one thing. He used all of his power to block one of Naito's punches. Then he didn't even dare to look at him or counterattack him, he turned his tail, then ran. However, Naito wasn't gonna let him go this easily. Since the time he opened the fourth stage of his shock, it becomes really difficult for Naito to find a good target to exercise his power. Naito could destroy a whole mountain with one punch. Therefore, this was a good chance for him. He could use the Ichibi as his target. Naito was actually considering whether he should capture him and bring him back with him. The Ichibi got horrified from the scary look on Naito's face. Then he dived into the sand sea, and ran as fast he can. "Hey, who said you can go?" Naito didn't hesitate to stop the Ichibi. He jumped, then he kicked the ground, targeting the sand sea with his powerful shock waves. The shock waves hit the Ichibi, the ground start cracking, and the Ichibi felt like if he was almost gonna collapse. Still he didn't stop and continued on running away. In the end, Naito kept chasing the Ichibi and left the village. The Ichibi couldn't help but escape the place. He wasn't even planning on going back. Even asking for mercy couldn't stop Naito from beating him. The Ichibi was defeated. The sand shine abyss didn't even move from their place. They all looked stunned. Even the death of their Kage was not as shocking as this scene. One man made the Ichibi ask for mercy. Although the Kage could stop the Ichibi all by himself, the Ichibi has never run away or asked for mercy. A breeze blew. Yet no man in the place has moved from his place. The time has passed by, and not a single one of them spoke. The only thing they were thinking about is how they were still alive. Naito kept chasing the Ichibi in the desert, but in the end, he lost him. The Ichibi was stronger in the desert, and after he chased him for a long time, Naito could no longer tell where the Ichibi go. Naito looked at the endless desert, then he shook his head with helplessness. He even looked a little bit disappointed. After he stretched his body, Naito felt that this battle was already over. Because he chased the Ichibi for a long time and lost, he took out the map and looked for his location. After he determined his location, Naito didn't felt like going back to the sand-hidden village but walked toward the battlefield, where Konoha and the sand were fighting. The sand-hidden village has already lost their Kage, their Anbu captain, and even their Baijua. Basically it was a waste of time to go back. However, it seems that the battle is still going all the way in the desert. Currently, the two Kusanagi swords were wielded by Naito. He sealed the first in his left hand and other in his right. The moment he held the second one, Naito felt a bit of connection between the two swords, but there wasn't any special effect. The two swords looked very similar. They had the same shape and sharp edge, yet there were some differences between the two. After all, these two swords are different. The first one, which is the one that was originally wielded by Orochimaru, has the ability to stretch and shrink. This ability can be used by injecting the chakra of the user. It's a very special sword, but it doesn't increase the attack power. However, the one he picked from the sand didn't have these abilities to transform or expand, but it had the ability to enhance the attack power of the user. To put it simply, using the second one combined with Naito's shock waves make its power stronger than the first Kusanagi sword. This sword is more suitable to Naito's ability. In fact, Naito doesn't even use the abilities of the first sword. However, Naito was still eager to get the third sword. The second he held the two swords, there was a faint sense of connection between the two. Naito felt that if he gathered the three swords together, there should be some kind of effect. Naito finally reached the location where the two armies were fighting. After he walked for a while, Naito finally stepped into the battlefield. It was an extremely fierce battle. The ground was destroyed, and a large number of corpses were lying almost everywhere. Naito observed the place, and it seemed like there weren't any people fighting. The two armies were taking a rest to prepare for the next one. However, it seems like the next one will be the last one. Naito though about what he did to the sand-hidden village, and couldn't help but smirk. Then he immediately went to Konoha's camp location. Soon, a temporarily building appeared in front of Naito. Konoha's camp. The headquarters was in the middle of the camp. The commander was still Sakumo, and Danzo has not appeared in the frontal battlefield for a long time, and no one knew what he was doing. In the commander room, there was a huge map of the sand in the middle, while Sakumo and Tsunade were standing next to the table analyzing the situation on the battlefield. We didn't make any progress in the previous battle. Tsunade and Sakumo kept staring at the map for a while, then the last took a deep breath and snorted. Sakumo sighed then said, "If it wasn't for you and your medical squad, and the antidotes that you've made for Kyo's poison, I am afraid that our casualties will have been a lot bigger than this." Tsunade nodded and said, "Yes, the environment here is really helping them, even if our army is stronger, after this long time, it started to affect them." She said these words and couldn't help but to slam the table in anger. Sakumo looked at her, then he shook his head and said, "It's more difficult than what I expected to break into the hinterland of the Windland. Once we entered this endless desert we become in a complete disadvantage. The Sandshine Abyss used the environment in their advantage and kept ambushing and raiding us. We really had a hard time dealing with them." Listening to Sakumo's words, Tsunade revealed a slightly helpless expression, then said, "It's true that we can suppress the sand in the battlefield, but as soon as they fell back in the middle of the desert, we will always be in disadvantage and lose. This battle is a must-win. I am afraid that the only thing we can do, is to keep pushing them until they will no longer be able to resist. If we just can backstab them and attack their village directly, this way they will have no longer a reason to fight." Tsunade said these words. Then she looked at their location in the edge of the desert, and couldn't help but laugh. They couldn't even reach the middle, how will they even be able to attack the sand-hidden village? That's very difficult, even with the help of the Hokage, it will be hard to raid the sand-hidden village directly. Moreover, even if we reach it in the end, we will suffer from the casualties and get defeated in the end. Sakumo took a deep breath then he shook his head. Even if they reach the village, how would they fight against the third Kazekage while he's favorable by the advantage of the environment of Windland? Even if it were Hanzo himself, he would not be able to defeat the third Kazekage in this kind of situation. Suddenly, while the two of them were discussing the situation in the battlefield, a ninja knocked on the door and reported back to Sakumo. "Sakumo Dono, Naito is here." "Naito-kun." Both Sakumo and Tsunade showed a hint of surprise, then they looked at each other, while their eyes revealed their happiness. It was almost a year since the last time she saw Naito. He disappeared in the Rainland for this whole time, and Tsunade couldn't help but feel happy that she was gonna see him again. On the other hand, since he's here they can finally make some progress. Sakumo and Tsunade thought about the same idea. Naito can be considered as a war weapon. Once he's here, even if they can't perform the backstab tactic, they can at least win the frontal battles and slowly advance. "Let him come in." Sakumo immediately gave him the permission to enter. Naito waited outside. He could enter and exist whenever he wanted, but he was just being respectful. After he pushed the door, Naito walked in the room. When he saw Tsunade, he smiled at her and said, "It's been a long time." Tsunade looked at him and chuckled, "Yeah, it's been a whole year, and you've changed a lot." Tsunade seemed like she has already reached the Kage level. She had a green mark on her forehead. Obviously, it was because of the reserve seal technique. Tsunade could feel that Naito has become stronger. He made a lot of progress in this year. She was afraid that he became even stronger than Sakumo. Naito walked to a chair and sat down. Then he smiled and said, Well, I've come here to help since I heard that you've missed me. Well, you're here now, and you should make up for that. Tsunade looked at Naito and smiled. On the other hand, Sakumo also smiled, then nodded. Yeah, it's about time. After we invade the Wind Land, we're gonna stop since it will be very difficult to go any further. The battle against the Sand Shine Abyss was tough for us because of the environment of this land. It's impossible for us to reach their village. It will be more than enough if we could at least win the frontal battle. But since you're here now, we can push them harder, and maybe we could advance after that step by step toward their village. Sakumo kept talking, while Naito has already taken a cup of tea in his hand. The moment he took the first sip, he heard Sakumo's last sentence. Tsunade nodded at Naito and said, "That's it, you're gonna participate in the next battle, Naito." Well. The expression on Naito's face, while he was looking at the two of them, made both Sakumo and Tsunade feel strange. If he wasn't gonna participate in the battlefield, then why did he come here? It's reasonable to say that the environment of the Wind Land won't affect Naito. It doesn't make sense that he doesn't want to join them. However, Naito's next sentence made them more surprised. "I think that there won't be a next battle." Naito said these words, and they couldn't help but get stunned as he shrugged, looking at the two of them. No next battle. This doesn't make sense since Konoha will not stop the attack, and the Sand Shuli will continue on defending. Then how wouldn't there be a next battle? Both of them got a little bit confused. In the next moment, a ninja rushed into the room and banded a knee toward Sakumo, while his tone was a little bit trembled. "Sakumo Dono. An urgent information. Is the Sand about to attack us?" Sakumo's expression was very serious, and his replay was very strong. It even made Tsunade stand up. "No. The Sand surrendered." The ninja's tone was a little bit trembled, and the shock on his face was still apparent. He was also surprised. Just hours ago, they were having a fierce battle, but now the Sand surrendered so suddenly. It's just unbelievable. When they heard this news, both Sakumo and Tsunade couldn't help but look at each other helplessly. Surrendered? What the hell? Tsunade widened her eyes and couldn't help but say, "They still have an advantage, and they suddenly surrendered. What is going on? Something isn't right." Sakumo's eyes flashed while he was thinking that this should be a trap. At this time, several thoughts flashed in his mind. There should be something. Just like Naito said, he estimated that there won't be a next battle. Did he know that Sand gonna surrender? However, why did they surrender, and how did Naito know? At this moment, both of them turned their heads and looked at Naito. Just as the two of them were preparing to ask Naito, another ninja rushed in with some other news. The ninja had a shocking expression on his face. After he came in such a hurry, he couldn't speak, especially when he saw Naito sitting in the middle of the room drinking his tea. What happened again? The Sand is not surrendering. Sakumo couldn't help but think that something wasn't right. Even the ninja who came with information couldn't talk, and Sakumo couldn't help but stare at him and ask. "Sakumo Dono, great news. Naito Dono alone invaded the Sand Hidden Village and killed the Anbu captain. And the third Kazekage. The elders of the Sand released the Ichibi, but Naito Dono has also managed to defeat him. The Sand Hidden Village got almost destroyed." When the ninja opened his mouth and said these words, the silence controlled the whole room. Even the sound of a falling needle on the ground could be heard on that moment. Even the ninja couldn't believe what he was reporting back to Sakumo. Sakumo was also stunned. Tsunade was shocked, and she couldn't even stand anymore. The only one who was as calm as ever was Naito, who was in the middle of the room drinking his tea. After a long time of silence, Sakumo and Tsunade turned and looked at him. Even the two ninjas were looking at Naito. The look in their eyes was really revealing their shock. Especially the ninja who reported back this news. He was afraid to even deliver it back without confirming it several times. How did you do all of this? Tsunade's eyes were shining with a strange color, even her tone was shaking. Naito shrugged, then said, I went there to get the Kusanagi sword, but I was stopped by them, so I killed few people. Killed a few people? What? These words struck them as like if they got hit by thunder. Sakumo teamed up before with Naito and defeated Onaki the third Tsushikage. However, they didn't kill him, they barely managed to fight back. To be able to kill both the Anbu captain and the third Kazekage, then defeat the Ichibi alone, is just too incredible. Although everyone knew that this wasn't as simple as Naito described it, still he really managed to do it. After he spaced out for a long time, Sakumo finally regained his focus. Looking at Naito, his eyes flashed. Sakumo couldn't help but smile a little, while his expression was slightly emotional. I never doubted that you will surpass me someday, but I didn't expect it to be this fast. Sakumo was very amazed as he said this sentence. Naito's growth rate is indeed incredible. No one can imagine that a 13-year-old can have such a power. To invade alone the sand-hidden village, and kill the third Kazekage, is something impossible even for the third Hokage. Probably only the first and second Hokage can do such a thing. Sakumo could no longer know how to treat Naito, but he knew for sure that even Konoha will have some problems dealing with him. The existence of Naito is really special. On the other hand, Tsunade stood there in silence looking at Naito in a very strange way. Just a few years ago, Naito was struggling to even survive in Konoha. The Uchiha wanted him dead, and she was the one who protected him, but now, Naito got a lot stronger. Even stronger than anyone in Konoha. When Konoha's Ashura invaded the sand and killed the third Kazekage all by himself, then defeated the Ichibi, the whole world became in chaos. No one could believe this news. No one believed it, until the sand itself surrendered completely to Konoha, and confirmed this information. Whether it was Onaki, Hanzo, or even Sarutobi, they were all shocked. Because they knew that Naito wasn't this strong. Especially, Onaki and Hanzo, who fought against him before, both of them were sure that Naito didn't have the power to invade a whole village by himself and kill its Kage. Even if the Kage is weak, he's strongest in his village. That little devil, his growth rate is crazy, it's as if he controlled a Baijua or something. Onaki was very shocked by this news, and more afraid of Naito's power. Perhaps, what he said is true, in this world, only a Jinchuriki can get this powerful after he controls his Baijua. On the other side, the third Raikage had a different opinion when he heard this news. The third Kazekage, the strongest Kazekage that the sand ever had, seems to be a weak person. The so-called absolute defense got destroyed by a kid. Pathetic. He threw the information on the table, then he folded his hands on his chest and snorted, but to be able to surpass a Kage is enough to prove the person's skills. The Raikage didn't care about how Naito managed to defeat the Ichibi, after all, he's the person who beat the Hokage several times. The land of fire, Konoha. Far away on the route to the village, Naito and Tsunade were standing there while they looked a little bit emotional. Tsunade didn't return to Konoha for a long time. Moreover, the Sanju and the Uchiha were totally different. The Uchiha clan only cared about war, they didn't care about Konoha or the safety of the village. they only cared about themselves. On the other hand, the Sanju really cared about the village. Therefore, the Sanju has suffered a lot of casualties. Even Tsunad's younger brother has died in the war, like the original, but this has been in the past. Finally, home. Yes. Naito looked at the village from a distance, and revealed a hint of emotion. Naito never felt safe in Konoha. In fact, he felt safer when he was in the battlefield, yet he finally became stronger. He will no longer fear anything. Whether it's Danza, the Uchiha, or even Sarutobi, no one can hurt Naito anymore. Naito never wanted to be a Hokage. The only thing he cared about is power. As long as he's strong, even a whole village won't be able to face him. Naito is already a Hokage, even if he doesn't have his own village. Of course, Naito may be able to invade the sand alone, but it's still difficult to do the same thing to Konoha. After all, they were stronger. As long as Konoha doesn't provoke him, he doesn't really need to do anything to them. Even though Naito has never felt that he belonged to Konoha, yet he grew up there, and he doesn't have any grudge to the village itself. Getting closer and closer to the village, a familiar figure flashed in his mind. He was gonna meet Kushina again. However, when he thought about her, he couldn't help but think about the Kyuubi, then about Juubi and Madara. Protecting her is even harder than protecting the whole village. He still needs to get stronger. Naito was also thinking about Uzumaki Mai, a character that it was absent in the original, but currently is living in Konoha. He couldn't help but think about the possibility of her replacing Kushina as the next Jinchuriki. This world is a bit strange. Devil fruit appears suddenly in the world, to create a new blood limit. Many things have changed because of it. Naito had a feeling that something was behind its appearance, someone was trying to change history. But obviously, he was fine by that, since it worked well for him. He shook his head, clearing his mind, throwing all of this behind him. As long as he reaches the peak, he will know all the answers. Konoha. At the main gate of the village, a lot of ninjas stood there. There were also a large number of civilians. They were all there to welcome the return of Naito and the others. Konoha's Ashura, and Konoha's White Fang. There are the titles of Konoha's heroes. Look, they finally come. Finally, one of them saw Naito from a distance, and immediately the crowd started cheering and shouting their names. Countless people were cheering. Tsunade and Naito stopped for a moment. On the other side, Sakumo smiled, then said, "Let's go." Yes. The two of them nodded, then they immediately followed him. Naito was looking in the crowd, searching for a particular person, but there were too many people, therefore he used the ultra-perceive technique. He found the person he was looking for in an instant. The joy on Kushina's face was indescribable when she saw Naito coming over toward her. He hugged her directly the moment he reached her, then he immediately used his Suro and disappeared from the crowd. The people were surrounding the three of them from all directions. Suddenly they could no longer find Naito, who was just a moment ago in front of them. The Hokage building. You can see the whole village from the Hokage's building. At this moment, two people were standing there. One of them was the third Hokage, and other was Danza. The expression on Sarutobi's face wasn't calm and peaceful as always, but it was very serious. "I didn't expect things to get out of control as you said." Looking from a distance at the crowd that was welcoming the heroes at the main gate of the village, Sarutobi couldn't help but sigh. His eyes were flashing, and he looked indefinite. Danza sneered and said, "I already asked you to hand the matter to me, but it's already late now." Not that he got magnificently powerful, but he also got very famous. It's become very difficult even for you to deal with him. Sarutobi was quiet. Indeed, with the popularity of Naito in the village, he became almost a hero of Konoha, which it made things even more complicated for Sarutobi to do anything to Naito, because if anything happened to the former, it will cause instability in the village. But it's not a matter of going toe-to-toe with Naito, it's actually about only controlling him. With Naito on their side, Konoha managed to make a big advantage at the battlefield, almost more than any other village. But what they will do if Naito decided that he's no longer gonna obey them? Naito's power nowadays cannot be underestimated. Once he decided that he's no longer gonna obey them, they won't have any way to force him to do anything. After a long silence, Sarutobi said, "We're gonna continue on waiting. He still belongs to Konoha, not to mention that he cares a lot about both Tsunade and Kushina." "You're being naive." Danza couldn't help but scream, with a hint of coldness in his eyes. In his view, a Hokage should have the absolute authority on his village. A Hokage that cannot control his village doesn't deserve to be one. You Naito need to be. Even if you have a plan, are you sure that it's gonna succeed? Once you do it, and it ends up being a fail, it will then cause a fierce battle against Naito, and that's the opposite of what we're looking for. Sarutobi turned at Danza and interrupted him. "Making him stay is already a big win for us. Even if he doesn't obey us, his existence only is a huge deterrent to other villages. It's like having a Baijua." With just a few words from Sarutobi, Danza's expression became gloomy and he could no longer know what he should say back. "Sarutobi, you should remember that you're the Hokage, you're the leader of Konoha." After a long silence, Danza's expression became cold. After he said these few words, he turned and left the room with a trace of coldness in his eyelids. Sarutobi looked at Danza's back, then he shook his head. He looked at the window while his expression seemed a little bit complicated. Things got really complicated. If Naito weren't an outsider, if he just were a member of Konoha, his strength wouldn't be a problem. He could even be the fourth Hokage. However, Naito wasn't born in Konoha. Although he grew up in this village, there won't be any chance for him to be a Hokage. Sarutobi has always liked Naito, but he didn't expect him to grow to this extent in a very short time. His power became a threat to the village, just like the Uchiha. But even worse, his growth seemed like if it didn't even have a limit, and it's just a matter of time before he starts causing trouble to everyone around him. Of course, Sarutobi knew that currently, he's not entirely out of his control, even if Naito managed to kill the third Kazekage and defeat the Ichibi. Sarutobi was way more stronger than both of them combined. He wasn't that old geezer that could barely seal Orochimaru's hands. However, he was still young, still strong. He was the man who mastered every single technique in Konoha. Sarutobi was undoubtedly strong. He was the man who had a very unique chakra. He could use the 5 natures of chakra, and this helped him master powerful ninjutsu. In his peak, Sarutobi's amount of chakra was extremely high. Even though his power was at the level of a Hokage, yet it also was at the peak. The reason why Danza was always under Sarutobi wasn't only because he had that very tough character, but because he was also way stronger than him. Konoha's streets. Naito and Kushina were wandering around the village. Naito temporarily put the third Kusanagi and the third stage of the lightning armor technique issues behind his back, and came back the village to rest for a while, and see if he get his hands on Konoha's scroll of seals. Naito could get it with no problems before, but it's unlikely to happen now. Before he goes back to the village, Naito got some information from Yoriko and Kanan. Nagato still didn't reappear. Kanan and Yoriko began to be active in the Rain Land, but it seems that there wasn't any problem. As for the Akatsuki, it seems that Yoriko has not yet thought about establishing it. Naito threw all of this behind his back. The only thing he was thinking about was being with Kushina. Naito didn't know how much he will be able to change the destiny, but he was sure that he can change some things. Naito felt that even if Kushina and Minato were dead, Naruto would somehow be born to save this world. But Naito knew for a fact that even if he didn't defeat Madara, Naruto and Sasuke would always be able to do it somehow. But he wasn't gonna rely on them to do it, he could only depend on himself. Naito-kun, taste this. Kushina happily brought 2 kinds of snacks from the store and handed one of them to Naito. Naito stopped thinking about all of this, and smiled at Kushina. Naito now is almost 13 years old. Kushina was also around that age, and it didn't no longer look like a little girl. She gradually turned into a beautiful young girl. Naito wanted to forget about Madara and his whole plan and stay with her. But in order to protect her, he needed to leave her, and become stronger. Kushina right now has become a Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, just like the original, nothing has changed. The seal was in its strongest state, the Kyuubi cannot escape it, and Kushina cannot use its power. Naito thought that there was a strong possibility that Uzumaki might could replace Kushina as the next Jinchuriki, but it did not. This is made Naito somehow confused about the future of Mai. Speaking of it, you were living with Mai lately, right? Naito gave Kushina some snacks to eat, then he asked her casually. Kushina shrugged and said, she's a strange girl, although she lives with me. She doesn't stay a lot in the house, I don't know what she's doing. Well, it doesn't matter anyway, let's go there. After she shook his head, Kushina smiled and followed Naito. Looking at her, Naito couldn't help but smile at her. Suddenly, she reached out Naito's mouth and wiped it with her fingertip. Some cream appeared on the tip of her finger. It was the cream of the snacks he was eating. Naito looked at her, then he immediately smirked and ate the cream on her fingertip. This action suddenly made Kushina's cheeks flush. The two continued to move forward. Soon they walked out of the street and came near to a very familiar place, the ninja school. Naito felt a little bit nostalgic when he reached it. Naito could still remember the suffering he went through in this place. How he worked hard and struggled to survive. After all, Naito didn't want to be another cannon fodder. However, no matter how hard he practiced, it was impossible for him to use ninjutsu. Fortunately, Naito didn't give up. He knew for a fact that there was another way to survive this world. He started a hell of physical training when other kids were practicing their ninjutsu. Naito was practicing as twice as hard his physical training. At that time, Naito has also suffered from the cold stares of the people. Even the teachers hated him, but everything changed when that devil fruit came from nowhere in front of him. Naito couldn't help but smile when he thought about it. Yes, it was all thanks to the Gura Gura no Mi fruit. Without its power, Naito wouldn't be able to reach his present level. Even if he practiced harder, Naito wouldn't even come near to his current level. Let's go in. When she saw the ninja school, Kushina has also felt a little bit nostalgic and pulled Naito's arm. Okay. Naito nodded, and they immediately entered the ninja school. Hey, everyone, look there, it's our hero. One of the teachers saw the two of them, then looked at Naito's teacher Nakamoto and couldn't help but smile. Nakamoto was still teaching the kids in the ninja school. He couldn't get promoted to a jonin, and he wasn't that strong, so he could barely maintain his position as a teacher. Let's go greet them, both of them were your students, this is a great honor. Nakamoto looked at other teacher, who looked very amazed, then he smiled and said, yes, yes. Nakamoto's response was very cold. After he said these 2 words, he walked away, leaving that teacher. The other teacher couldn't understand the reason for his behavior. Nakamoto kept walking aimlessly in the campus, while his heart was full of anger. He was cursing his poor luck. If he just could figure how much Naito was talented, his reputation could have raised a lot because of Naito. But how could he know that at that time, Naito was weak, he a very poor talent, he couldn't even cast simple ninjutsu. Then out of the blue he became strong, then he grew a lot stronger in just a few years. His heart was overwhelmed with sorrow and anger, and as he was walking aimlessly he almost hit someone, but he managed to react at the very last second. You. Nakamoto raised his head and saw 2 familiar figures, and he suddenly got shocked. He could easily recognize him from first glance. The person who was standing in front of him is one of his former students, Naito, Konoha's Ashura. Nice to seeing you again, Nakamoto-sensei. Why yes. It's been a long time. Nakamoto's forehead got overwhelmed with cold sweat, and his heart was shaking from fear. He didn't expect Naito to greet him, and he knew for a fact that Naito didn't like him. After all, Nakamoto mistreated him, he even tried to kill him. But things are different now, the status of the 2 men was completely incomparable. With one stare from Naito, Nakamoto's whole body starts shaking. Kushina stood beside Naito and kept watching. She knew how many problems Nakamoto caused to Naito when they were still in the ninja school. However, watching him trembling and shaking in front of them, made her felt a little bit satisfied. In fact, Nakamoto wasn't a bad person, he was very good to the other kids, he only hated outsiders. Kushina looked at Naito, she was afraid of what he was going to do next. However, Naito didn't do anything, he gently grabbed her little hand, and moved forward. Let's go. Okay. Kushina nodded and followed Naito. When the 2 of them walked away, Nakamoto felt relieved, yet this short encounter made his whole body soak in sweat. Naito didn't even care about him, he passed right beside him, while he was shaking in fear. Nakamoto felt very embarrassed. Yet he couldn't do anything about it even if he wanted. With a touch of regret in his eyes, he turned away and left away in silence. After they took a walk in the ninja school, Naito and Kushina left the place and headed toward the streets again. The sky gradually got darker, therefore Naito escorted Kushina back to home. Kushina's hand was very soft, and Naito really liked holding her hands. Just when he was about to leave, he suddenly saw a girl in the distance looking at both of them. Suddenly, Kushina got very embarrassed, and let go of his hand. Then she looked at that girl and snorted, "You're really late, where are you going every day?" "Well, isn't it late for you too?" Uzumaki Mai replied. Then she looked at Naito and couldn't help but get surprised. You Naito, right?" "Yes." Kushina looked at her and got a little bit defensive, then stood up in front of Naito and with a fierce look on her face she said to Mai, "Hey, why do you ask?" Mai suddenly showed a helpless expression, and said, "It's only natural that people will get a little bit curious when they see the famous Konoha's Ashura." "Don't be." Kushina looked very serious. Looking at the 2 of them, Naito couldn't help but smile lightly. He reached out Kushina's shoulder and pat it, saying, "Well, you 2 go in, I will go now." "Well, don't forget to come and see me tomorrow." "No, I will come and see you." Kushina nodded at him lightly, then she kept looking at Naito while he was leaving. Then her expression instantly became a bit annoyed. She looked at Mai, then she said, "Where do you go all day? I always feel like you're hiding something." "No, nothing." Mai's eyes slightly moved to the corner, then she snorted, and smiled. Speaking of it, you should care more about yourself. What do you mean? Mai laughed. Then she entered the house, then Kushina followed her. Back home, Naito started cleaning up his house. It was a long time since the last time he was here. The dust was everywhere, but cleaning was really easy for ninjas. Although Naito didn't practice his other chakra nature, yet he mastered it to a certain level, so it can be a little bit useful for him. Wind release, Hurricane. A very simple wind ninjutsu. With the help of Naito's control, the wind wiped out all the dust from the room. After cleaning up, Naito didn't rest, but instead, he sat in the corner. He looked as if he was waiting for something. Sure enough, in less than a moment, a masked Anbu appeared from nowhere in front of Naito. However, he looked very respectful. Naito Dono, can you please follow me to the Hokage's office? Even the way they talk has changed. Usually, they will just say the Hokage summons you. But now it's different. Finally. Naito whispered this word in his heart, then he nodded at him, stood up, and followed the Anbu to the Hokage's building. Once again, Naito was in the Hokage's building, but the feeling he had this time was different. This time, Naito used his Ultra Perceive to explore the whole building, and the result was astonishing. The entire building was covered with perception aura. It was the same aura that was also covering the whole village, but because it was a lot smaller, it was a lot stronger. It's really impossible to sneak into the Hokage's building. Moreover, even if you somehow managed to bypass this aura, with the help of his Ultra Perceive, Naito found out that Anbu and Shinobis were guarding the whole building from every direction. There's even some Anbu outside of the building hiding in the dark watching every move around the building. Besides, Naito also sensed the location of the Scroll of Seals, where the security was higher. Several groups were guarding it from every direction, and the room itself was next to the Hokage's office. In this case, it will be impossible to steal the scroll without being noticed. It looked very easy when Naruto stole it in the original. No doubt he used some kind of a trick to steal it. Naito couldn't sense all of this before, but with the use of the Ultra Perceive technique, his eyes can see everything. Soon, Naito finally reached the Hokage office. There was only one person in the office, but he wasn't sitting in his chair as usual, he was actually sitting on the floor. After he saw Naito coming in, he invited him to come and sit next to him. Naito, come here. While he said these words, Saruobi served Naito a cup of tea. Naito looked at him quietly, then he sat down without saying anything. When he saw how quiet he was, Saruobi took the initiative to talk. The situation on the battlefield improved a lot thanks to you. This sentence made Naito's eyes slightly flicker, because his tone, and the way he talked, wasn't the same as always. It looked like if two Kages were talking to each other. Naito killed the third Kage, although this doesn't make him a Kage, but even if it's the Hokage, he must treat him with respect. This my duty to the village. After all, if it weren't for Konoha, I wouldn't even be alive. Naito said these words, then he picked up the tea from the table and took a sip. Saruobi kept looking at Naito, observing his movements, his eyes, and even his tone. After that he heard these words, Saruobi felt really relieved, and the smile on his face became more natural. This is actually true. If it wasn't for Konoha, Naito may have already died just like any other Kusanagi member. However, the things Naito did for Konoha on the battlefield should also pay his debt to the village. Konoha could still win even if he weren't there with them, but the casualties would have been 10 times more. Because of the interference of Naito in the Second Shinobi World War, a lot of things has changed, the cloud and the rock ended up fighting against each other. In the original, the cloud and the wind were the one who fought each other, but the former surrendered because of Naito. The water didn't participate in this war, so it was a two-horse race. Only Konoha and the cloud had the power to win these battles. The rock retreated in the end, and the cloud won the battle. The rock wasn't a strong contender, after all. They suffered a lot of casualties in the last war. The Land of Fire managed to gain a lot of resources thanks to the surrounded of the wind. Konoha was the biggest winner of this war, but it was all thanks to Naito. Naito took another sip from his tea, then looked at Sarutobi. "HoKage-sama, I hate troublesome, I prefer leisure. If you have some merits, you shouldn't count them, and I don't really want to deal with Konoha's trivia." Naito made it very clear with one sentence, he wasn't interested in any status, he didn't want to be an Anbu captain, not to mention to be the Hokage or even his assistant. These words made Sarutobi's heart tremble for a moment. If he wasn't really interested in status or positions and he was telling the truth, in this case, he shouldn't be afraid of Naito or feel threatened. People who don't have that kind of ambitions are not a threat. But Sarutobi couldn't tell if he was telling the truth or not. Even if he didn't want that ambition of becoming the Hokage, it was clear that Naito wants to be free. Naito didn't want to be bound to anything, he just wanted to protect the people he cares about. To be honest. Naito glanced around him. He was inside the Hokage's office, and he needed to be careful not to disrespect him, but still, he needed to ask. "Uzumaki Kushina, is she's already?" "Yes." Sarutobi interrupted him. He knew that Naito was gonna ask him about whether Kushina has become a Jinchuriki yet, and he wasn't that surprised about the fact that he knew about it. However, this news was classified as top secret information. Even the three legendary Sannin didn't know about it. After all, Kushina was still young and weak, and she needed to be protected. Although Naito was aware of it, he still needed to confirm it. In that case, that's fine. Naito shrugged his shoulders, then he took his tea and took a sip and said, "The other thing is that I'm interested in some of the techniques in the Scroll of Seals." Whether he could take it or not, Naito wanted to be straightforward and ask it. After he listened to what Naito said, his eyes flashed slightly, then he smiled and said, "This isn't a problem." "What?" Naito felt a little bit strange, something seems wrong. Naito has said that he wasn't interested in any kind of status, but still his strength only is some sort of threat. You can't really trust someone because he said you can. He's still not out of control, that's why he could be a handy tool for them, but once he is, people like Danzo will never accept his existence. And now Naito wants to see the Scroll of Seals. The Scroll of Seals has records of every single technique since the establishment of the village. The most important ones were the second Hokage's techniques. Each one of them was extremely powerful, but they were very difficult to learn. The Scroll of Seals had even the studies that the second Hokage did on the Edo Tensei. Without these studies, Orochimaru wouldn't even be able to complete it. If Naito gets his hands on the scroll, there's no doubt that his strength will be enhanced. Is Sarutobi really okay with making Naito even stronger? However, after he thought about it, he understood that Sarutobi didn't really have a choice but to agree. It's really hard to refuse, it will only make their relationship even worse. Without forgetting that Sarutobi didn't think the same way as Danzo. He wasn't trying to control Naito or anything, he didn't want to go to that extreme. "Come with me." Sarutobi stood up and took Naito to another room where the Scroll of Seals is stored. The scroll wasn't only guarded by several groups of shinobis, but it also has some kind of seal. After he activated the seal, he took out the scroll of seals and handed it to Naito. At that moment, Sarutabi's expression became serious. "You can have it, but keep in mind, you will have to return it in 3 days. And the techniques inside it cannot be leaked out." Looking at the scroll of seals in his hand, Naito was still a bit amazed. He really didn't expect it to be this simple. Naito was really about giving up on it. He was ready to go out after a few days from the village and look for the 3rd stage of the lightning armor technique. But now, after he got his hand on the scroll of seals, it was only natural that he was gonna focus on it. He was more interested in the forbidden techniques inside it. After he gently nodded his head to Sarutabi, he left the Hokage building with the scroll of seals. As he was watching Naito leaving, Sarutabi looked a little bit relieved, and there was a hint of inexplicable light in his eyes. After he returned back to home with scroll of seals, he used his ultra perceive to make sure that he wasn't followed. After all, he needed to make sure that the scroll of seals is always safe. There should be some Anbu following him to make sure it doesn't get stolen, but there wasn't. This is made Naito feel more strange, and he began to doubt everything from the start. After he opened it, Naito got really stunned. Whether it was the Flying Thunder technique, Shiki Fujin, the Edo Tensei, or the other strong forbidden techniques, they were all missing from the scroll. It only had techniques like the shadow clone. There's no doubt this is a fake scroll. If it were any other person other than Naito, he wouldn't even know if it was fake or not, but what they didn't know is that Naito knows everything about the scroll of seals. "Sarutabi, you're trying to play with me." After he shook his head, Naito felt a little bit disappointed. He had a lot of hope on this one. He wasn't interested in Edo Tensei or Shiki Fujin. He only wanted the Flying Thunder technique. However, this technique is very difficult to use, otherwise, Minato and Tobirama wouldn't be the only ones who mastered this technique. Naito continued reading the scroll. This time, Naito began to read the scroll over and over. Shadow Clone Technique, 8 Gates. Brutal Force Technique. Naito kept reading and muttering to himself the techniques that he already mastered. Basically, a lot of the other jutsu wasn't even that good. Actually, there was a lot of band techniques, earth and water releases, genjutsu techniques, but nothing suitable for Naito's fighting style. What a joke. The expression on Naito's face was very painful. It looks like Sarutabi has made a lot of effort to make it seem like the real deal. The stare on his face was very cold. In this case, he shouldn't blame me when I take the real scroll of seals with my own hands. While he was looking for a plan to get the scroll of seals, Naito kept reading the scroll in his hand until he reached the last page. Suddenly Naito's expression changed. He was preparing to close it directly. He didn't expect to see a technique that he was actually interested in. Spirit Transformation Technique. The forbidden technique that Kato Dan has used in the original story. It allows the soul to leave the body and cross a vast distance. This technique helped Dan kill a lot of enemies. The user can even control enemies while he's in the spiritual world. This move, which is said to be very similar to the body-mind switch technique, is actually different. It's classified as a control technique, but in reality, it's not like any other one. It's actually a soul-like technique. Naito kept looking at the technique carefully while he was lightly narrowing his eyes, revealing a thoughtful expression. This technique is basically divided into 3 categories: ninjutsu, taijutsu, and genjutsu. It's just like Edo Tensei, it belongs to all the 3 categories. However, in Naito's point of view, it shouldn't belong to any of these categories. It should be classified as an art of soul techniques. Of course, this is the same case for Shiki Fujin. The spirit transformation technique seems to be a foundation to the Edo Tensei. Still, it will need a lot of studies to reach its secrets. Even Orochimaru's technique, which allows him to switch bodies, seems to be related to this technique. Maybe because he thought it was too basic and doesn't seem to be important, he put it in her. Naito felt a little strange thinking that Sarutobi was this careless. In other words, Sarutobi thought that Naito wouldn't actually care about using this technique to kill people, since his power allows him to do the same without turning into a spiritual form. He was too careless to see the benefits of obtaining the secrets of this technique. The second Hokage had a lot of strong techniques. This man is really a genius, no one can be compared to him. I don't know how long he studied to come out with these various strong techniques. Naito kept studying the spirit transformation technique from the beginning several times until he reviewed all of its secrets. Then he closed the scroll of seals. Naito has always wanted to learn an art of soul technique. His shock power made him immune to both ninjutsu and genjutsu. The only thing that can be a threat to him is the soul class techniques. Whether you're a corpse or even a god, it will always be a threat. If he could understand it and master the soul class techniques, he may be genuinely immune to everything. He will be perfect. Moreover, with the reverse Hakemon Tonku, Naito feels that he might gain other benefits from it, since the course of the chakra flow is also reversed. It may be involved with the soul and realm. 3 days later, in the Hokage building, Naito returned the scroll of seals to the third Hokage. He felt like he got slapped in the face when the third Hokage told him if he can help him with anything else. Naito was too lazy to start a fuss out of this. He was happy with getting the spirit transformation technique. He needed to practice it more and study its secrets. But it gave him a great knowledge about the secrets of the art of souls. With my current strength, even a forbidden technique wouldn't do me much. I need to focus more on my bloodline limit, Naito said to Sarutobi. Listening to Naito, Sarutobi's eyes flashed slightly, but his face showed a hint of pity, then said, "That's a pity. If just there were forbidden techniques that are suitable to your fighting style, you would have got a lot stronger, maybe even stronger than me." When he heard these words, Naito twitched his mouth and wanted to throw the scroll on his face. However, since he learned the spirit transformation technique, he didn't care about what Sarutobi said. Speaking of it, Naito's Ultra Perceive allow him to sense the strength of people. This time, Naito felt like if he was a lot stronger than Sarutobi. Even though he's at the peak of the Kage level, but he's not invincible. Moreover, he still didn't learn the Shiki Fujin technique or even heard about it. Currently, Sarutobi is not that weak old man, he's at his peak. Still, Naito could have crushed him if he wanted, but he was too lazy to do it. After he dealt with a few sentences, he left the office, and he was ready to start practicing his new technique. Because of the spirit transformation technique, Naito delayed his trip to the Cloud Village. Although he wasn't afraid of third Raikage, still, he was too strong and outrageous. Getting third stage secrets from the Cloud is no doubt much harder than getting the Kusanagi sword from the Sand Village, and since he had a new technique to work on, it didn't worth the risk to go all the way to the Cloud. Naito hit the streets of Konoha and start walking. These streets are really lively since it was located in the center of the village. While he was walking, Naito saw a familiar figure. Unexpectedly, Naito saw Mato Dai, who was holding a basket buying some food from the street. It's really unexpected to see that Mato Dai has some time to buy some food inside his crazy training schedule. Oh, it's Naito. When Mato Dai saw Naito, he looked very surprised, yet he smiled and said, "Hello, I was performing some task a few days ago, I couldn't go back to welcome you when you returned to the village. You've become a hero, kid. Konoha's Ashura sounds strong. Listening to Dai's words, Naito smiled, like he said, walking in Konoha's street is completely different from before. He's like a celebrity. In the past all that he received were those cold stares, even girls looked disgusted looking at him. But things are really different now. Girls looked very jealous looking at how Kushina was wandering around with Naito. Looking at the basket in Dai's hand, Naito was still curious and asked him about it. How come you have time to buy food? Oh, this is. Dai showed an inexplicable smile, then he suddenly pulled Naito and said, come back with me to my house, I will treat you today. Naito wanted to go back and start his training, yet he still wanted to catch up with Dai, so he followed him to his house. Finally, they reached Dai's house. Yes, Dai's son has already been born, and he was named Guy, Lee's teacher, and the man who opened the 8th gate and almost killed Madara. But now he's just a little baby. However, Naito couldn't help but laugh out loud when he saw how that little baby had thick eyebrows. It's just too funny. Dai obviously looked very happy. In the future, this boy will certainly grow into a great ninja, and his name will resound throughout the world. Naito looked at Dai, who was holding Guy, and whispered these words. It seemed as if it was a blessing, however, it was a fact. No matter what happens from now on, Guy's name will definitely resound throughout the world. Dai felt very honored when he heard these words, because it wasn't any man's blessing, it was Konoha's Ashura. Yeah, my son will definitely be a great ninja, and maybe even stronger than you. Dai smiled at Naito, then awkwardly he said, if anything happens, you should take good care of little Guy. Of course. Naito nodded lightly. He will never forget the man who taught him about the secrets of the Hakemon Tonku. He would have never learned it if Dai didn't help him, and of course, he will do anything for him and for Guy. Although he might not be enough to be a match for a genius like Kakashi, he knows that Guy will grow up fine, and will get stronger through the years. After he got treated to a meal and stayed to a very late hour, Naito heads off back to his home. Although Naito has asked for it, Dai didn't want to give him a drink, because he was still a teenager. Naito didn't push him much, and couldn't help but smile. Naito didn't feel this warm in a long time. Unfortunately, the warmth has only lasted for a moment. War will never stop, and Naito needed to be ready for it. After a good night of sleep, Naito woke up the next day and started his training of the spirit transformation technique. In fact, in the past few days, Naito has already begun practicing it. Chakra is energy extracted from the human cells combined with the spiritual energy of human beings. The spiritual energy is undoubtedly extracted from the human soul. It's based on the will of the person. The stronger the will, the stronger the energy will be. This is why many people can burst into a powerful force and reverse the situation although they were losing. It's all about the willpower. The spiritual energy can explode at any time, bursting the chakra flow and giving a lot of power. In other words, chakra is the link between the body energy and spiritual energy. However, Naito chakra is somewhat different from others. Naito chakra comes from the opening of the Hakemon Tonku's gates. As a result, the practice of spiritual energy has fallen into a bottleneck. This kind of techniques is more difficult, not to mention that Naito is a special case, and he needed to find another way to link his chakra to his spiritual energy to further reach the soul, but he couldn't think of any way to do it. This is weird. Naito opened his eyes, touching his chin and revealing a trace of doubt. Chakra is originally the source of life. To break it into something more basic like spiritual energy is really difficult. let alone to touch the soul itself. But can the ultra-perceive touch the spiritual world? After the idea flashed in his mind, Naito closed his eyes again, but this time he blocked all of his 5 senses to make his ultra-perceive at its strongest state. Naito has finally perceived the existence of spiritual energy. Naito ignored the chakra that was running through his whole body and focused on his spiritual energy. The spiritual energy is even more illusory, in fact, it seems to be related to the momentum, will and these sort of things. After gradually finding the direction, Naito began to study its depth. However, Naito's chakra is still somewhat different, making him unable to display the spirit transformation technique and consolidating the soul into a substance. Naito first started to connect his momentum, will and such thing with his spiritual energy, but this process seemed to be somewhat difficult. It's not like it doesn't work, but if he tries to condense them all together, they will explode all together to the outside, forming an invisible spiritual impact. The fusion of both his momentum and will form a direct impact from the spirit energy. This can be regarded as a kind of illusion, but the range of this attack is wide, and it's really different from the shock force, it's almost invisible to eyes. During the experiment, the invisible impact directly stunned some ordinary people along to some other shinobis in the outside, causing Konoha to fell into chaos. They even thought that someone is trying to invade them. Even an Uchiha could be harmed by this spiritual shock, some of them even collapsed. There is no success in casting the spirit transformation technique, instead, it seems like if I created a spiritual shock wave. Because the practicing of this technique seems like it's gonna affect the village, Naito headed toward the hills behind it. Speaking of this, in addition to this spiritual shock, Naito can also use his shocks to target all direction, a little bit similar to the Shinra Tensei, but still quite different. Naito continued his practice, trying to see if he can combine both the spiritual shock and the shock force. Even though the effect could be a little bit ineffective, but even the slightest enhancement to his shock force will be useful and maybe magnificent if could make it stronger later. After trying a few times, Naito failed to combine both forces. The shock force is already too strong, therefore, it cancels the spiritual energy the moment he tries to combine them. And the spiritual energy alone is not strong enough to have an effect against the Kage level. To enhance the power of the spiritual shock, it's necessary to have a stronger momentum, and will, on the other hand, it will be better if he started from the fundamental of the spiritual aspect, that is, to find a way to reach and strengthen his soul. Strengthening the souls has always been what Naito wanted. If he can strengthen it, he will gain a true immunity, and even more. However, there isn't a lot of soul techniques in the world, and only a few people have studied it. I need to return to the fundamental. The only choice I have is to go back to practicing the spirit transformation technique and find another way to reach the soul level through chakra. Only by reaching that level, I can find a way to strengthen the soul, otherwise, it will only be a waste of time and effort. After he sat on a rock, Naito bowed his head and started meditating. Finally, after a few hours, he ended his training and was ready to return to the village. Naito started to consider asking for help, and the first person he thought about was no one but Kato-dan, who mastered this technique. Just when he was thinking of ways to find Kato, he saw a figure coming for a distance. "Naito, did you finish your training?" There's no doubt that this person is Kushina. She couldn't find him anywhere in the village, so she came outside looking for him. After she did that for so many years, it became really easy on her to find Naito. "Well, let's go and grab something to eat." Naito stood up and flashed from the mountain and appeared again in front of Kushina. Naito looked at her cute face and couldn't help but pinch her cheek and tease her. It's getting dark, let's go. Kushina's cheeks blushed slightly, then she picked his arm, and started to run toward the village. Naito took a glance at her face, then he smiled and followed her. It's really weird that no one from the Anbu department has followed her. Thinking about this, Kushina has been captured before in the original. It's a bit strange that they managed to take her from the inside of the village. Naito felt a little bit strange, and he shook his head immediately. He couldn't think of any way for them to take Kushina from the village, but he estimated that this plot has been rewritten anyway. After walking for a while, the village buildings start to get visible. Suddenly Kushina turned toward Naito, and her face showed an inexplicable expression. Then she whispered at him, "You know Naito, I've been following Mai lately, and I know what she was doing every day." Naito was surprised. He didn't expect Kushina to do such a thing. "She seems to be spying on someone, but I don't know who it is." "Well, she might be doing a mission." Naito couldn't help but also feel that something was wrong. This character has not been mentioned in the original. Her existence itself is strange. She's not a Jinchuriki, not strong, she's only a regular shinobi. After he ate lunch with Kushina, Naito returned to his house to rest. The next day, Naito began to look for Kato. Kato is a shinobi of Konoha, but what people don't know, Kato is actually an Anbu, but not any regular Anbu, he's a squad captain. Although Naito lost all of his privileges in the Anbu department, it's still really easy for him to collect information about anyone. After he looked around for a while, he found out that Kato was gonna attend a high-level meeting in Konoha. Naito didn't even know about this meeting. This a bit interesting. Even if I'm too lazy to attend any meetings, they still should let me know about them. Slightly shaking his head, Naito's face showed a hint of ridicule. He wasn't sure if this was Sarutobi or the other elders. Konoha's high-level meetings are not the same as the elders' councils. The attendees are the elites. The elites are the strongest shinobis in the village. There's no such a classification of these people. Some of the elites can even be at the Hokage's level. Just like Naito, he's the most abnormal. Naito's rank is Jonin, but his strength is beyond that rank. He killed the third Hokage, and defeated the Ichibi all by himself. He even wanted to make him his pet. There's not a lot of people in the world that can be compared to him. He's obviously at the Hokage's level. Naito is definitely qualified to participate in such a meeting. He stood up, then he stared directly to the Hokage's building. It's likely that if he received a notice about this meeting that Naito wouldn't attend it, but now, he's definitely going. The Hokage building. In the conference room where the meeting was gonna arrange, there was a big round table, surrounded by a lot of shinobis. Basically, every elite in the village was there, even Jiraiya. At that time, Tsunade was standing there putting some documents on the table. On the top, there was a book about the construction of a training institution for the medical ninjas and the inclusion of them in the task squad. Adding medical ninjas to the task squad can greatly reduce casualties. Do I even need to say more than this? Tsunade slammed the table and couldn't help but think about her younger brother. The sorrow and the grief has never left her heart, but she needed to be serious at this moment. However, the ninjas who were present in the meeting were more confronted, and Sarutobi was sitting on the top of the table frowning. Even if it's gonna reduce the casualties, it's still gonna cost us a lot of money and resources. A ninja spoke. The others listened to him, then they looked at each other and nodded. Almost no one in the audience supported Tsunade's idea, which made her very angry. Suddenly, a voice came from the outside of the room. "This proposal is excellent. why no one is approving. With a calm expression, Naito entered the room. The two ninjas at the door didn't even dare to block him. Naito's arrival made the whole atmosphere in the room suddenly changed. Kato, who was originally prepared to stand up and support Tsunade, showed a hint of surprise and sat back. "How come you?" "Naito." Tsunade was a bit stunned. She felt strange when she didn't see Naito in the room. She thought that he was just too lazy to attend the meeting, but when she saw him, she immediately looked back at Sarutobi. Sarutobi's face had a weird expression. Sarutobi's expression immediately returned to normal. After all, he was a Hokage. Then he smiled at Naito and said, "I heard that you have been busy recently. I thought that you wouldn't be interested in attending the meeting, that's why I didn't inform you." "Well, that's true, I'm not interested." Naito nodded at him, then he looked at Tsunade and said, "But Tsunade's proposal is actually excellent, and I support her, what do you think?" Naito said this, then he turned at the others. Although only the elites of the village were sitting in this room, still, one gaze from Naito changed the atmosphere, and they start to feel inexplicably suppressed. Although he's just a Jonin, yet he was as strong as a Hokage. No one in this room can doubt Naito's strength, nor his judgment. I also support Tsunade's proposal. Kato was the first to support it, although he was initially gonna support her. Someone has actually taken the lead, so the pressure was off, which led to a second person, then a third. After that the rest of them looked at each other, then nodded at once. Originally, they weren't refusing, they were only neutral. They felt that such a matter still needs to be considered carefully and even being studied several times before they can come to an agreement, but Naito changed all of this. No one wants to offend Konoha's Ashura. Of course, some people still objected it, so they needed to hear the Hokage's opinion. Although he thought it was really a good idea, it was still a big deal, and it was better if they took it slowly and decided after further studies. But Naito ruined everything with his appearance. Of course, this proved to Sarutobi that Naito wasn't only strong, but he also has that strong personality and prestige not only with the lower status but also among the elites. Some people are very respectful to him. Well, since everyone agrees, let's try it and see how it will work, then we will make a final decision. After a long silence, Sarutobi decided to go with the idea. Upon seeing it, Naito took a final glance at Sarutobi, then he left the room. Yes, he was right, Naito was too lazy to attend such meetings. Naito felt free to enter then leave such a high-level meeting. The people in the room were looking at each other, but none of them felt offended. They all smiled and shook their heads. Tsunade looked at Naito's back while he was leaving, then she smiled. She was really grateful to him. After that her expression became more serious and looked at the audience and said, "Well, if we're gonna try this, first we need to organize everything." The Hokage building, outside of the meeting room. Naito wasn't interested in the meeting, instead, he wanted to explore the entire building using his Ultra Perceive. Naito wanted to see if he could avoid the perception aura and steal the information directly from the scroll of seals. Unexceptionally, Naito managed to avoid it completely. Yet unfortunately, the scroll was protected by another seal and Naito couldn't see its content. What shocked him was that this aura, that even Pain didn't sense it when he tried to invade the village. Naito with his Ultra Perceive could detect it and even avoid it. This is incredible. Still, the range of this aura is really big. Just how big is Konoha? The aura seems to cover even the hills around the village. This enchantment has been created by the second Hokage Tobirama. The work of this man has always amazed Naito. After he waited for a while, the meeting was finally over. At first, he saw Tsunade, so he said hello first, then he turned immediately toward Kato. Naito Dono. Kato was a little surprised. Although he was younger than him, yet he felt he needed to be respectful to Naito after the achievements he did in the previous battles. Come with me, there's something you need to see. Kato nodded at him, then two of them immediately walked out of the village. Although he didn't feel good about it, he respectfully followed Naito. The two of them walked for a while. This is the thing, I heard you've mastered the spirit transformation technique, and it happened that I am interested in this technique and am currently trying to learn it. Naito stopped and turned to look at Kato. Kato was a smart man, he immediately understood Naito's intentions and said, "And Naito Dono wants my help?" "Yes." Naito nodded. Suddenly his nervous expression calmed down and couldn't help but smile. "Of course, there's no problem, I'm happy to help you, Naito Dono." "Naito Dono, I will do my best to demonstrate this technique to you, however, this technique is very special. Even if I slow down, I'm afraid that it will be a little bit difficult for you to see everything clearly. Because, how do I say it, it involves an invisible spiritual field." As he said this, Kato started printing. This technique is forbidden, Kato has used it to kill many enemies, and Naito has the chance now to witness it for the first time. This went smoothly, he didn't expect it to be this easy, he thought that Kato wouldn't be willing to show it, Naito was ready to force him or even fight him to let him use it. In fact, Kato's character seems to be a bit like Minato, but he wasn't as good as him. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, Kato printed some hand signs and was ready to use the technique. The chakra started to flow in his body, but the flow itself was completely different than usual. It doesn't flow in the same regular pathway system, however, the chakra is getting restrained from a moment, then it gets completely disappeared from the body. Naito's eyes cannot see this clearly, but his ultra perceive can clearly sense the chakra flow and his the soul that is getting spiritualized. When the soul gets spiritualized, it can be seen by the naked eye. This technique can be even used to let the soul stay in the world forever if it's strong enough. Like I thought. Mastering this technique enhances the soul itself. Looking at how Kato's soul has flown out of his body, Naito whispered these words to himself. Since Orochimaru can capture the other's body, there's no doubt that his soul is stronger than those people. Although it can lead to the destruction of his own soul. Kato's soul is undoubtedly stronger, but Naito thinks that Madara has the strongest soul. That's why he could free his soul from Kabuto when he got restored by the Edo Tensei. It's simply incredible. This is the whole thing. He said this in his spirit form, then he rushed toward his body so fast and got control of it again. Naito nodded at Kato and said, "Well, thank you." After he said this, Naito sat down and started his meditation. Kato looked at him, and without disturbing him, he left him in silence practicing this technique. Time flies very quickly, and after a few months, Naito has finally mastered the technique. However, using this technique in terms of attack was obviously not that significant for Naito, since he couldn't use any of his techniques in the spiritual form. What Naito really needs right now is a passive skill, like the third stage of the lightning armor, which can strengthen his fighting power. Practicing the spirit transformation technique itself has the effect of enhancing the soul, but the degree of that improvement is shallow. After all, this is an attacking technique. Therefore, Naito was trying to find other ways to strengthen his soul. And this is much more difficult. When he tried to change the nature of the Hakemon Tonku, he had Dai to help him achieve that, but this time, he's on his own. Fortunately, Naito's prior knowledge has always helped him in this world, and it hasn't been this incompetent until this time. In addition, Naito has found out while he was practicing this technique that his soul is much stronger than Kato. It's not just because he's stronger than Kato, it seems that the fact that Naito himself is a passer made his soul stronger than the indigenous people of this world. The sky was gradually getting darker. Naito finished his training, and was ready to return. Just as he stood up, Naito showed a strange expression, then started to look around. This is strange. Kushina didn't come today. Kushina comes almost every day to see Naito. Speaking of it, Kushina is a Jichuriki, she hardly leaves the village, and she's always secretly protected even in the village. Naito felt even stranger when he thought about Naruto. He was also a Jinchuki in the original, but he still could leave the village and even perform dangerous missions. In case Kakashi couldn't protect him, wouldn't Naruto be in danger then? Naito shook his head and tried not to think about these issues, then he turned away and returned to the village. Originally, he was going back to his home directly, yet he couldn't help but check on Kushina. Strange. Naito couldn't find her at her home, so he headed directly to the Hokage building. It appeared that Kushina was assisting some other shinobis at repairing the sensing barrier around the village. The whole village is protected by this barrier, no one can cross it without being noticed. After all, this is the best way to keep an eye on the people who are entering and leaving the village every day. This kind of enchantment needs to be repaired and reviewed regularly, and Kushina as a member of the Uzumaki clan was good at this kind of jutsu and seals, so she was a member of the repairing team. Mai was also helping with the work, so she wasn't at home too. This didn't seem like a problem, but Naito for some kind of reason didn't feel right about this. No matter how many times he thought about, he never understood how Kushina got kidnapped in the original. Now, it seems that this is the reason. Because she was repairing and reviewing this barrier regularly, she was undoubtedly going out of the village and even reaching its edges, which is extremely dangerous. The barrier is very huge, and it's not easy to keep an eye on her since it covers a huge distance. This is not right, I need to take a look. Naito had an incomprehensible feeling in his heart, and he decided to go the border of the village and see. Although, Kushina had done this many times before and there wasn't any problem, but who knows what will happen this time. Naito soon reached the borders, and the barrier was right in front of him. He couldn't even touch it with his fingertips. It's almost invisible to the naked eye, but with his ultra perceive he could sense its existence, but its range was only a few miles away, which is too small compared to the village barrier. But he still couldn't find Kushina, so he began to look around the barrier. After a while, Naito's expression changed. This is bad. With his ultra perceive, he could sense some traces of tearing in the barrier. Naito kept moving forward. He couldn't see it with his own eyes, but he still could sense it. There's a fight over there. There were some shinobis corpses from Konoha, and a huge part of the barrier was destroyed. The most important thing is that he couldn't find Kushina anywhere. Whoosh! Naito flashed at top speed. Almost after a few moments, he reached the spot. Watching the situation in the battlefield, his eyes became cold. Very cold. From observing the injuries on those bodies, he could estimate that those people were obviously attacked by lightning release users. They managed to attack them, then leave very quickly before being detected. With this kind of speed, Naito was certain that they were attacked by the Cloud Shinobis. Unlike the Sand Surprising Squad, the Cloud Surprising Squad were known for their speed. It's finally happening. And Konoha's response is really slow. Naito took a deep breath, then his killing intent was revealed in his eyelids. Under his ultra-perceive he could sense some of the Anbis and other Shinobis rushing at very high speed, but compared to Naito they were too slow. Naito was too lazy to wait for them. With one step, he rushed out of the village and into the darkness. After he left, several Anbu and Shinobis arrived. This is bad. The barrier got broken during the review process. Damn, we reacted too late. Looking at these wounds, they got attacked by lightning users. They sneaked in and left very fast without being detected. What our scouts were doing? With one glance, the Anbu analyzed the situation very fast. The other Shinobis kept looking at each other. At this moment, Minato stepped in and said, "Can you detect which direction they took?" One of the Anbu printed a seal with his 2 hands and closed his eyes. After a moment, he shook his head and said, "I can't sense anything." At this time, a ninja came running from a distance. She had red hair and she was at the same age as Kushina. She was Uzumaki Mai. After rushing over, she looked at the field, and in an instant, she understood the situation, and with a worried expression, she looked at the others. This is the second repairing force. Kushina should be in it. Did she? Took away by the enemy. There are 2 repair teams, and because both Kushina and Mai were from the Uzumaki, they worked on separate teams. Seems to be. I can't see her body. Some ninja glance at the field. Kushina is currently the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, and the ninjas who are present are almost unaware of this matter, and Sarutobi wasn't aware of this accident yet. At this time, the news has finally reached Sarutobi. Sarutobi felt as if he got slapped in the face, and he looked furious. The Kyuubi's Jinchuriki has been taken away. Chase the enemies. And at all costs, bring these people back to me. In an instant, the news reached Sarutobi. The entire village was alarmed. Even though it was already dark, he commanded a large number of Shinobis to find her. In the middle of the jungle, 2 figures flashed. Wait. Uzumaki Mai stopped for a moment, then she printed a hand seal and closed her eyes. After a breath, she opened her eyes and showed a hint of joy. Great, I can feel her chakra, we're getting close. The person standing next to her was Minato. His eyes flashed, then he said, "No, I will catch to her quickly. When we get closer you will go back and inform everyone, then you will leave the place." But wouldn't it be better if I came along? Don't worry, I will be fine. Minato smiled at her, which made Mai's heart inexplicably warm, then she nodded at him gently. Later, the 2 of them went in the direction where Mai sensed Kushina's chakra. The relation between Kushina and Mai wasn't simply as cousins, it actually was stronger than that, since the 2 persons were very similar. They even look alike, sometimes even Naito cannot tell the difference. However, Kushina was still the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. This fact didn't change, therefore, the story became somewhat confusing. Naito has always felt that things are changing. The appearance of Uzumaki Mai itself is suspicious. No matter how he thought about it, he never found an answer, so he just let it go. Because Madara wouldn't be able to pull out something like this. Just like the original, she's using her hairs as a trace. Naito stopped in front of a treetop and picked another hair. Although Kushina's hair is bright red, is such a forest, it cannot be simply found. However, with Naito's Ultra Perceive, although he cannot perceive the color, he can sense every single one of them. Using this, Naito could easily track Kushina. Although the speed of the Cloud Squad was very fast and picking up her trace slowed him down, yet Naito wasn't that far away from them. This proves how fast Naito is. In the forest, More than a dozen cloud shinobis were rushing fast through the forest, and their bodies were covered by a lightning aura. One of them was holding a little girl tied by a rope in his hand. Kushina's hands were tied on her back, and she could barely reach her hair. She kept leaving her hair as a trace, throwing it in the forest when they weren't looking. However, even she didn't believe that anyone could notice it. It's too difficult to see her hair in this dark forest. We're already far away from Konoha, with this kind of distance. Even her cousin Mai wouldn't be able to sense her chakra. As the cloud shinobis went further and further in the forest, Kushina was getting more and more afraid that no one would come to rescue her. But she never gave up. She kept leaving her hair as a trace, hoping that someone will notice. With this kind of speed, even if someone finds the traces, I'm afraid, they will still be able to reach the clouds before anyone can rescue me. Kushina couldn't speak, her mouth was sealed, and the steel was locking her chakra. Of course, if she could move her hand, she could easily cancel the seal. However, she was working a little by little on weakening that seal. But the problem wasn't the seal itself. Even if she gets free of the seal, she wouldn't be able to escape from these shinobis. They were much faster than her. Speed was their specialty. Their leader was a Jonin who had an excellent reputation. Naito should return to home by now. He will find out that I'm not there, but even if he noticed that, it's too late for him to catch up, even if he can find the traces. Kushina was whispering these words. But she didn't give up. She kept trying to weaken the seal and leave traces behind. Finally, she managed to crack the seal. She immediately broke the rope and tried to escape. Whoosh! However, in no time, the cloud's Shinto reacted so fast and surrounded her again. The cloud's shinobis were way faster than her. She cracked the seal. Just how strong are those Uzumaki members? Let's just knock her out and carry her back to the village. It doesn't matter what happens to her as long as the Kyuubi is fine. Suddenly, the look on their faces changed and became very cold. Kushina stood in the middle trying to protect herself, while she was very confused about how the clouds Shinto know her identity. How did they know about the Kyuubi thing? Even the people in Konoha didn't know about it. This is simply unbelievable. We need to act fast. We don't want Konoha shinobis to catch up to us. The squad leader looked at the others and gave the order. The other ninjas nodded, and they were ready to attack. Kushina took a defensive stance, ready to block their attacks. Whoosh! Kushina doesn't rely on the Kyuubi's strength, but she was still a Chunin. With her power she could barely avoid their attacks. But the expression on the cloud shinobis was very calm, they weren't worried. With their speed, even one of them was enough. Just as Kushina jumped in the air trying to reach a treetop to escape, one of them flashed toward her, while his body was covered by a lightning aura. Kushina was still in midair, and she didn't have any chance to avoid his attack, and the guy's speed was too fast compared to hers. She simply couldn't react. For the first time, Kushina felt despair, and finally gave up. If they caught her again, they will knock her out, and she wouldn't even leave traces anymore. No one will be able to find her. Just when she thought that this was the end, suddenly, something flashed right in front of her. That's it for this video, guy. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Also tell me your recommendations in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching.